How does a world champion lose his home Grand Prix on the opening lap to a 50-centimeter strip of leftover water? Red Bull's brutal statement about that accident forces us to question everything regarding their 2026 title defense. Max Verstappen clipped that specific wet patch sitting just inside the dry line, exiting the final corner, banking at Zandvoort. He lost the rear when he got back on throttle because he believed the track had finally dried. The heavy wall impact ended his race instantly and silenced the entire home crowd in disbelief. A red flag paused proceedings for roughly an hour while marshals cleared the debris from the circuit. The real story is the uncomfortable truth emerging from the aftermath of this shocking incident. This was not merely bad luck, but a catastrophic failure of judgment exposing an unexpected vulnerability. What makes this situation so tense is the separate investigations unfolding behind the scenes during that long stoppage. Stewards opened probes into Franco Colapinto, Arvid Lindblad, and Esteban Ocon for alleged yellow flag infringements committed after the crash. These penalties create a parallel narrative of scrutiny that distracts from the central mystery of the crash itself. Colapinto and Lindblad were confirmed to serve drive-through penalties as a direct result of those specific infractions. We must ask if this chaotic backdrop masked a deeper operational issue within Red Bull's own awareness. The team is now being forced to confront these hard questions publicly after such a high-profile failure. Technical analysis definitively ruled out any car fault or component issue with the RB22 chassis. 50 centimeters is the exact width of the damp zone that destroyed a home race. 2 contacts occurred in rapid succession before the inevitable barrier strike. He managed the first slip but failed to recover from the second one. Throttle application came too early for the available grip levels. Rear tires broke traction immediately upon acceleration out of the banking, while impact followed without any chance of correction or recovery. The burden falls entirely on residual pre-race shower dampness combined with critical driver decision-making. So where does that leave us with the broader implications for the championship fight? You are left with a statistical anomaly that demands a concrete explanation beyond simple excuses. Can any amount of simulator preparation truly replicate the deceptive visual cue of a drying track? Verstappen believed the corner had dried based on years of mastering this specific circuit. The physics of that 50-centimeter strip proved completely indifferent to his reputation or past glory. The tension remains unresolved by simply blaming the weather conditions at Zandvoort. Weather is a variable every single team faces equally throughout the season. We need to understand why the most dominant driver fell victim to a navigable hazard. Red Bull's unflinching assessment tells us about the fragility of championship campaigns in 2026. This moment redefines expectations heading into the final stretch of the year. The telemetry data from that fateful opening lap paints a picture of instantaneous disaster rather than gradual decline. Verstappen's RB22 registered 2 distinct lateral load spikes within milliseconds of each other as he exited the banking. The first contact with the damp asphalt was manageable because his momentum carried him through the initial loss of adhesion. The second contact proved fatal to his race because it coincided precisely with throttle application. He applied power believing the racing line had returned to optimal grip levels after the pre-race shower passed through. That 50-centimeter strip of moisture sat deceptively inside the dry line, where drivers naturally position their cars for maximum exit speed. Zandvoort's unique banked geometry amplifies these microclimate variations in ways that flat circuits simply do not replicate. Water evaporates unevenly on inclined surfaces depending on sun exposure and wind direction throughout the morning. Track temperature sensors confirmed the surface was above the threshold for standing water accumulation at that exact moment. Yet residual dampness persisted in the shaded section of the final corner exit, despite ambient conditions suggesting otherwise. This discrepancy between sensor data and actual tarmac condition created the trap that caught the championship leader. No mechanical failure contributed to the loss of control according to post-incident technical analysis. The RB22 performed exactly as designed up until the moment physics intervened against driver expectation. Red Bull engineers found zero evidence of suspension damage or aerodynamic compromise prior to impact. Grip vanished completely. Tires spun freely. Momentum shifted sideways. The wall approached faster than any correction could arrest the slide. Impact velocity exceeded safety thresholds but remained within survival cell parameters. Marshals responded immediately to secure the scene and protect the driver from secondary incidents. Race control deployed the red flag without hesitation once the extent of barrier damage became apparent. Spectators witnessed their home hero walk away unharmed but visibly frustrated by circumstances beyond mechanical control. Formula One.com characterized the weekend as disappointing in their immediate post-race coverage headline. That single word barely captures the magnitude of losing a home Grand Prix before completing one full racing lap. So what does this tell us about the evolving nature of risk in modern Formula One? We often assume technological advancement eliminates variables like unpredictable track evolution. Sensors provide teams with more environmental data than ever before in the sport's history. Yet human interpretation of that data remains the critical link between information and action. Verstappen trusted his experience over real-time feedback in that split-second decision window. Experience usually wins those calculations, but occasionally fails against anomalous conditions. The brutal reality is that even perfect preparation cannot guarantee immunity from microscopic track imperfections. This incident forces every team to reevaluate how they process marginal weather transitions during active racing phases. Zandvoort's coastal location makes it uniquely susceptible to rapid weather changes that defy standard forecasting models. Pre-race showers left behind moisture patterns that shifted minute by minute as clouds moved offshore. Other drivers navigated the same hazard successfully by adjusting their throttle application points earlier in the lap. They recognized the visual cue of darker asphalt shading and adapted accordingly before reaching the danger zone. Verstappen's commitment to the traditional racing line reflected confidence born from countless previous laps at this venue. Confidence becomes liability when conditions deviate from established mental maps of circuit behavior. The 50-centimeter strip exploited that gap between memory and present reality with devastating precision. Picture this for a second. The entire paddock frozen in suspended animation while marshals worked to repair damaged safety barriers and clear carbon fiber debris from the racing surface. That 60-minute red flag period transformed Zandvoort from an active competition venue into a static workshop where strategy dissolved into uncertainty. Teams could not adjust setups or change tires during this mandatory pause under current 2026 regulations. Drivers sat idle in their cockpits or garages watching monitors display repetitive footage of the incident they had just witnessed live. The psychological weight of that enforced stillness compounded the physical shock of the opening lap collision. Competitive rhythm shattered completely when the leader's crumpled chassis came to rest against the outer wall. Restart procedures demanded everyone reset their mental approach as if beginning a new race entirely. Race control confirmed the stoppage duration at approximately 1 hour before signaling resumption protocols. Barrier repairs required specialized equipment and certified inspection before declaring the circuit safe again. Medical teams completed their assessment of Verstappen and released him without injury concerns. Red Bull mechanics faced the grim task of loading destroyed components onto transport trucks rather than preparing for pit stops. Their operational focus shifted instantly from championship contention to damage assessment and logistics management. No amount of strategic planning could salvage points from a car that no longer existed in functional form. The team's brutal statement emerged from this void of competitive possibility. Silence spoke louder than any press release could have articulated in that moment of absolute finality. Debris fields spanned meters. Carbon shards scattered everywhere. Barrier deformation exceeded repair tolerances initially assessed by track personnel. Safety crews worked methodically through the wreckage zone with practiced efficiency. Replacement panels arrived on flatbeds while spectators waited patiently in grandstands. Time moved differently inside that red-flagged hour compared to normal racing cadence. Adrenaline faded into contemplation as the reality of retirement settled over the Dutch crowd. Home fans processed collective disappointment while international viewers absorbed the sudden shift in championship dynamics. Lando Norris inherited a lead he had not earned through overtaking but through circumstance alone. So how did the remaining competitors adapt to such an abrupt disruption in competitive flow? Kimi Antonelli capitalized on the chaotic restart to briefly seize position ahead of Norris in the early laps following resumption. His aggressive move demonstrated readiness to exploit any opportunity presented by the altered race state, yet Norris reclaimed the lead in the closing third of the Grand Prix to secure his second consecutive victory of the season. George Russell completed the podium in third place after navigating both the initial chaos and the restarted phase without incident. These results emerged directly from the vacuum created by Verstappen's premature exit. Championship standings recalibrated around survivors rather than favorites in that pivotal moment. The hour-long pause also triggered separate steward investigations unrelated to the crash itself, but occurring within its temporal shadow. Franco Colapinto, Arvid Lindblad, and Esteban Ocon faced scrutiny for alleged yellow flag infringements committed during the immediate aftermath of the accident. Race control opened these probes while the circuit remained neutralized under red flag conditions. Colapinto and Lindblad received confirmed drive-through penalties as consequences of their respective infractions. Ocon's case proceeded through standard review channels without immediate penalty announcement. These disciplinary actions unfolded parallel to Red Bull's own crisis management efforts. Attention fractured between multiple storylines competing for narrative space during that extended stoppage period. Remember how this all started, with the question of how a champion loses to a 50-centimeter strip of water on the opening lap. That specific measurement defined not just Verstappen's retirement, but the entire competitive landscape that emerged in its wake. Lando Norris inherited a race reshaped by that microscopic hazard and converted circumstance into his second consecutive victory of the 2026 season. Kimi Antonelli led briefly after the restart, but could not maintain position against Norris's superior pace in the closing third. George Russell secured third place to complete a podium entirely composed of drivers who avoided the opening lap chaos. Championship points redistributed based on survival rather than pure speed in that decisive moment. Norris managed his tires perfectly through the final stint, while Antonelli struggled with degradation after his early race surge. The McLaren's balance suited the evolving track conditions better than any other car in the field post-restart. Pit window strategies recalibrated around the red flag reset rather than original fuel calculations. Teams that adapted fastest to the new race state gained positions over those clinging to pre-crash plans. Russell benefited from clean air and consistent lap times once the initial restart turbulence settled. His Mercedes showed strong, long-run pace that had been masked earlier by traffic. Podium finishes now carry extra weight given the unpredictable nature of this season's mid-phase. Tire management decided it. Pace followed strategy. Execution beat opportunity. Norris demonstrated championship-caliber composure under pressure that would have overwhelmed lesser drivers. Antonelli's brief lead proved valuable experience despite ultimately finishing second. Young talent gained exposure to front-running pressure without the burden of defending against Verstappen's usual dominance. The Dutch Grand Prix produced a result nobody predicted when engines first fired up that afternoon. Weather and track evolution created variables no simulator could fully replicate. Adaptability emerged as the true differentiator between contenders and also rans in 2026. What does this victory mean for the broader title fight heading into the remaining races? Norris closed the gap significantly while Verstappen scored 0 points at his home event. Momentum shifts dramatically when favorites falter and challengers capitalize without error. Red Bull faces renewed pressure to respond before the championship deficit becomes insurmountable. McLaren's development trajectory appears aligned perfectly with current technical regulations.